Hey there. So my next guest is a sports psychologist in the esports space, and he's blazing a trail. Like there's very few guys and gals in this space who are doing like the psychological work, figuring out how to do the performance improvements, how to get into the minds of the players and help them not just improve, but also overcome some of the issues that they're having. So he and I really I love this interview because we were able to like dig up some like particular issues that I think can help anybody who wants to be a gamerpreneur. Hey there, everybody. Welcome back to the Gamerpreneur podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Bradford Carlton. Today I have a very special guest with us. I have Landon Gorbenko. Hey, Landon, how's it going?
I'm pretty good. Excited to start chatting.
Absolutely. So where do you hail from, Landon?
So I live in Toronto right now, up in Canada. I'm actually from the west side of Canada in a town, or in a city, I guess it's not a town, but in a city called Calgary, but it's kind of stuck in the dark ages there in terms of esports. So when I made the transition, I had to jump ship and move to a bigger city.
Absolutely. I understand. I spent 9 years in a small town in Ohio, California, or no, oh my God. What am I thinking? Ohio, United States. It's Akron, Ohio. I grew up in California on the West Coast.
Gotcha.
Not like you. I grew up on the West Coast. I moved east, and then I'm actually back west again.
I was going to say, California.
That was a major brain fart.
Yeah, that's all right. It happens.
Oh, this is like my 5th interview today. So.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
No, anyway, let's just get into this. That's enough of that. Landon, why don't you go ahead and just tell me a little bit about yourself, and we'll roll from there.
Yeah, for sure. So I'm pretty much as gamer as it comes. Like I grew up in gaming. My cousins were a lot older than I was, and I wanted to fit in with them. So I started learning how to play like Super Mario and then Halo and Call of Duty, just so I could kind of hang out with them, like as a young kid. And that kind of just continued to develop as life went on, and I found my way into pretty much every game you can name, like RuneScape, WoW, Call of Duty, Halo, League of Legends, pretty much anything under the sun, I've probably played it at this point, if it's competitive or multiplayer. That's my niche, is competitive and multiplayer games. But I kind of, when I was coming up, there wasn't really a career in competitive esports yet, so I went to college, got my degree in psychology, and I was planning on becoming a counselor or a psychologist and just kind of doing the mental health thing. And nearing the end of my degree, I had this panic moment. I was like, that's not what I want to do. I'm not going down the right path. I need to throw the brakes on. And I started hunting down different kinds of psychologists or different kinds of mental health careers. And I was chatting with a lady who told me about sports psychology. She kind of gave me the rundown of what it is, what you do with people, how it works. And I fell in love with it. So I decided to continue that path, and I got my master's in performance psychology. And then I came to this point where it was, what do I do with this? Do I go into traditional sports? I'm not a sports jock. I don't know that much about sports. Or do I merge it with my love of gaming? Because by that point, competitive esports has been a thing. You got League of Legends, you got the CDL, the Overwatch League, you got Fortnite. Everything's big, and there's a spot and there's a gap in that industry for those sports psychology and performance coaches. And I was like, there it is. Let's go that route.
Rock on. Oh, good for you. You figured it out like a full decade before I did. I actually went down like that traditional path. Like I went to school, I went to law school, and like the first day of class and orientation, they're like, you're not children anymore. You're not allowed to play video games. You're not allowed to say dude. On the West Coast, all I did was say dude and play video games. Right?
Yeah.
But I did that for years, as the attorney. And then I wasn't happy. I think you get that. Like, it's not what I want to do. So rock on for figuring it out in advance before you wasted years of your life.
Yeah. Well, truthfully, there was some rocky spots there as well. Like during my master's, I didn't know if it was possible to make a career in esports, but I went to my professor and I sat down. I was like, listen, I want to do my research. I want to do my dissertation in esports. And I was expecting a little bit of resistance because he's traditional sports, big into rugby, big into lacrosse, big into cricket, those kind of things, like traditional sports. And so I was a little bit nervous about that. But he was like, I don't know it, but like, if that's what you love, go do it. Like, he gave me the encouragement, even though he didn't know what it was. And I think that was a big stepping stone for me. If he didn't do that, then I probably would have ended up in traditional sports somewhere. But I think mentorship was key for me getting into esports.
Very cool. Absolutely. Mentorship's so key for everything, though, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Well, before we kind of get into the real meat and potatoes of my podcast, I ask everybody a single question at the start. And if you've seen any of my shows, then you'll know it's this one. So on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being high, how weird are you, Landon?
Oh man, I think I'm extremely normal, but if you were to look at me from the outside, I'm probably pretty weird. I think the weirdest part about me actually is that my two biggest passions in life are absolute polar opposites, where one hand you have that nerdy, I want to stay inside all weekend and I want to play video games, I want to play League of Legends until the sun comes up kind of thing. Like, so that's one side of my personality. The other side is I'm a diehard wilderness camper, so I'll climb mountains, I'll sleep on mountains in the middle of winter, and I will go on 2-week survival trips. And so it's like there's these two dichotomies on absolute opposite ends of the spectrum, and I think that makes me kind of, I don't know, weird, but very unique, I suppose.
That's interesting. From a psychological standpoint, it sounds like you really like isolation.
I honestly, that's a good way to put it. I love a big friend network. Like I love going out with my friends. I love hanging out. I love going to movies or playing games or whatever it might be. But yeah, no, I'm definitely more of like a introvert when it comes to that kind of thing. But I am very outgoing. I love people. I love talking to people. So I still got that a little bit.
Absolutely. Okay, so this is the gamerpreneur, and you kind of a little bit told me your gaming background, but when did you first start playing video games?
Oh man, so I was born in 92, and I probably played my first video game, I don't know, when I was like 5 years old or something like that. So it's been a good 2 decades of playing video games for sure.
Okay. And
Yeah.
you picked up that controller and it was like never look back, or was it one of those love-hate things to begin with? How'd it go?
No, it was pick up the controller and never look back. I remember actually this is a little bit of a tangent story, I guess, but I remember one time my cousins, like I mentioned, they were much older than me, so I was the young kid, and my cousin had a NES and he let me borrow it one time, or he was let me play it. I don't remember what it was, but I had to give it back. And I cried because I was so sad about giving. I was only like 5 or 6 or whatever it was, so it's not like an addiction thing. It was just I was so sad because I loved it so much. But no, it was a very lovely relationship right off the bat.
Very cool. Okay. And I'm assuming you continued to play. You told me you played a bunch of MMOs. So I have to ask on Warcraft Hoarder Alliance.
Horde.
Geez. I don't think I found an Alliance person yet.
Yeah, I was always, my go-to class was a Blood Elf Frost Mage. That was my favorite thing.
Okay. I love it.
Yeah.
What do you play now?
League of Legends primarily. So I love Apex, like Apex Legends, but right now my laptop can't handle it. Every time I try to get in, I DC because my computer just starts making a whole bunch of weird noises and I crash. So it's pretty much just League of Legends for the time being. But once I upgrade my computer a little bit, I'll be into Apex. And then I'm anticipating that I'm going to be a big Halo Infinite player because I love Halo. So when that comes out later this year, I'm hoping to dive into that because I do. So it's like MOBAs are my top choice right now. So League of Legends, but I love arena FPS. So hopefully Halo is a nice fix to that.
Absolutely. Okay. So like you're a sports psychologist in the esports space, and kind of I'm going to bridge this gap, non sequitur. Do you have to play the game that your athletes are playing in order to be able to understand them?
So yes and no. At the end of the day, like performance is performance. The principles and the strategies and the tools that go alongside learning and development and performance are pretty much uniform across domains. That's why somebody like going through my master's program, I can bring that training, which never focused on esports, and I can bring it into esports because performance is performance. So when you're talking about like nutrition, exercise, sleep patterns, mental skills, cognitive tools, whatever it might be, they translate very nicely across domains. The sticky part is when you start talking about terminology. So if I'm a diehard soccer fan and I'm trying to teach somebody about League of Legends, I'm not going to know what ganking means or what tilting means or what CS means or what a nexus is. Like I won't know those terms. So when I'm trying to connect and build that rapport with my clients and those athletes, that's where it gets difficult. So no, you don't need to know the game per se, but it makes that job so much easier if you can speak the language of that game.
Okay. Now, I don't want your client names, but do you work for any organizations at the moment?
Yeah. I usually work on a contract basis. Sometimes a client will just kind of come like on an on-call basis. Sometimes it's contract. Right now, it's a little bit chaotic just because of all the shutdowns. Some teams have killed a little bit of their funding, or they're kind of being a little bit more reserved with their funding. So it's a little bit chaotic right now. I'll get a call from maybe like an amateur or semi-pro team, or occasionally a pro team. They'll be like, hey, we need 1 month of training, or we need a couple sessions, or whatever it might be. I'll go in, do that. But yeah, right now I only have a handful of clients that are consistent. Other than that, it's just an on-call or a contract basis.
Okay. And what exactly does this job entail? Like, you just go in and screw them up and then fix them again? Or like, how does this work?
I just go in, yell at them, and throw apples. That's all I do. No, I'm just kidding. Yeah, so I can kind of break it down. I'll keep it a little bit surface level so we don't take up the next 6 hours of your time. But
I love psychology, by the way.
Oh, good. There we go.
I use it in sales. Like, it's so big on the sales and marketing side.
Exactly. And that's the thing, is like a lot of people in my field, they'll go into sales or they go into business performance, because you can, like I said, you can kind of take these skills and translate them into any domain. And so people will teach business reps or CEOs on how to be more effective with employees or with sales too. So that is absolutely applicable for sure. It's something I haven't done, but I know a lot of my cohort, well, a handful of them went into the business side of things, which was pretty cool. Okay. But yeah, sorry, to answer your question. So there's a few ways that I kind of dive into working with them. If it's a team-based setting versus individual setting. So if it's like, if you come to me as an individual athlete and you're like, hey, I'm struggling with things, that session will look a lot different than if you were an entire team, because just the way that you kind of work with issues is different. So it'll be more of like a conversation where I'm helping to dissect what's going wrong. Like, let's say performance anxiety is an example that I use all the time, because it's very, very frequent in esports. If you're struggling with performance anxiety, you might not always know that you're struggling with performance anxiety, but you'll come to me, you're like, man, I went to that Valorant tournament, I was ready, and then I just completely dropped the ball. I didn't perform, and my team lost because of me. And they don't fully understand always like why that is. And that's where I come in. We have a conversation. I poke around a little bit, trying to get you to say things, or trying to get you to kind of like open up. And then I'll usually find an issue that pops up. So like performance anxiety in this case. And then we'll work through that. We'll kind of try and figure out, we'll pressure test some strategies and tools on how we can go about resolving that. The thing that I always tell the athletes that I work with is the mental skills, or the mental side of things, is not necessarily like lifting weights, where it's everybody can go do barbell curls and build your biceps, right? Like it's pretty uniform. It's pretty simplistic. Like that's what you do to get bigger biceps. But when it comes to the mental thing, one strategy or one tool or one kind of plan might not work for the same person. So you have to kind of pressure test different strategies with them. So with performance anxieties, we'll pressure test a bunch of things. We'll explore different options between you and I, and we'll just really have a conversation about what we think would work for you. You'll go out, you'll test it for a couple of weeks. I'll be there to kind of help guide you through it. A couple of weeks down the road, you might be like, this isn't working. I'm still freaking out. I'm still not able to handle these jitters. And then we'll try something new, and we'll just continually like work that cycle and try and find ways so that you can perform under that anxiety. When we're looking at more of like the team setting, it's not as much of a conversation. What typically happens is I'll do like a presentation or a little micro seminar or some kind of like guidelines that I'll give to the team. We'll go over that. We'll dissect it as a team. And then I'll usually hold some kind of workshop where the team is working through an issue together. And so that one's less of a conversation, but more of a workshop. So presentation into a workshop. Okay. And that way the team is learning how to kind of manage that.
Okay. Can I go back to your one-on-one? Because what I told from what you just said is that you're wrong a lot.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And I don't mean to like make it sound like all facetious, like, oh, you're always wrong. I mean, you're testing. It really does sound like the sales side of it. You try something, see if it works on the psychology of your target market, whoever that is. And then, if it works, you continue down that path. If it doesn't, you try something else.
Exactly.
As someone who's you're still fairly new to this field, right?
Yeah, roughly 2 years now. Okay. I guess that's not super new. But
as you've been doing this, have you felt any like sort of imposter syndrome? Like you're testing something and you're hoping it works, but it doesn't. And now you're like, oh shoot, am I actually good at my job? Is that something that you experienced yourself?
Constantly. So kind of going into a different note quickly, one of the things I tell a lot of people is that if I would have come into this industry and got a job with TSM, Cloud9, CLG, any big org you can name, if I would have got a job with them right out of the gate, I would have completely ruined my career because I was not prepared for the stress and the demands that some of the players would have. And I was I was not good at my job at that point. And I needed to go through all those periods of working with amateur teams and working pro bono and building my experience so that I could prepare myself and I could learn, like, how does an athlete respond and how am I going to be a better practitioner? And I had to go through all that myself in order to get to the point where I'm at now. Because, like, again, if I would have got with a big team right off the bat, I would have probably not helped them, might have caused a little bit of harm, and then completely ruined my reputation. And there goes my career. So it's good that I wasn't good off the start, that I didn't get a gig off the start. So I'm very thankful. That's one of those like silver linings that I'm thankful for looking back in time. But yeah, I actually just had a conversation with a different performance coach, and I think he's down in the States somewhere. And we were talking about that very thing. I was like, how do you assess whether you're doing a good job with that team? Like, they might say, oh, Landon, we really enjoyed working with you, but then go out and you might have not had any impact on them. Like, they might not be getting better. You might even cause harm. I was like, how do you go about assessing that? How do you make sure that you're doing well so that you continue doing well with other clients? And I think that's a struggle that almost everybody in my field has, because it's very hard.
What did he say? Like, what was the advice?
There was, like, that's the thing. It's like both of us were like, yeah, it's tough. It's tough to know. And a lot of it relies on, like, you can monitor, like, growth of the athlete. Like, is the athlete getting better? Are they ranking up? Is their team happier? Is their team dynamic stronger? Are they resolving issues by themselves? Because that's one of the things I aim for, is like, can the team resolve issues by themselves? That's an indicator of success, because most teams can't. When an issue is in esports, most teams can't resolve issues by themselves. When something happens, they blow up, the team falls apart, and they all go looking for a new team. So if I can get to it, if a team is starting to resolve those issues by themselves, I know that I'm having an impact. A lot of it also does come down to perception too. Like, if an athlete feels like you're helping them, you probably are helping them. Most people, even though they might not be keenly aware of what's going on, they do get a sense of whether they're improving or not. And so just by assessing, like, their perception of you is a good way of kind of understanding whether you're helping them or not too.
Beautiful. Okay, on your end, how do you find clients? Like, is there a directory for esports sports psychologists or what?
No, that was probably the biggest learning curve that I had to figure out coming into esports, because I came in a little bit arrogant, I would say, because I was like, oh man, I've got a degree in psychology, I've got a master's in performance psychology, I'm a gamer to the core, I understand what's going on. Where's all my clients? Clients come to me, like, I'm ready for you. And it was not that case at all. Like, so basically the approach that I've taken is that if I want clients, I got to make sure that I'm extraordinarily visible in the community. So to do so, I go in the Eastern Canada, so in Toronto and Montreal mostly. I make sure that I go to pretty much every land. Well, not right now, there's no lands, but every kind of in-person event, and I'm talking to people and I'm networking with people, and that could be like panels, it could be breakfast or lunch, it could be LAN events, it could be just conventions, whatever it is, I'm there and I'm making sure that I'm talking to people, I'm making sure that my name is getting out there, so that when people are discussing, like, maybe there's a team that's like, hey, we need somebody in this, and they're like, oh, I know somebody, I met him at EGLX last year, let's go chat with him. So I do that. I make sure that I'm super, super active on Twitter. Like, lately, I make sure I tweet out little tips and strategies like 2-3 times a day. If I see somebody else that's tweeting, that's struggling, I'll reply to them with a little comment of maybe like a little tip or advice. Just really, again, the whole purpose is just to make sure that I'm getting out in the community, I'm being active, and I'm trying to engage with the people that I want to work with. And then on the final piece, and this is where we met, is on LinkedIn. I'm very active on there as well. Same kind of plan, but a little bit of a different execution. There, I'm typing a little bit more long form content on, like, what can you be doing about performance anxiety? How do parents handle their kids in esports and blah, 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 like any kind of topic I'm posting there. And rather than connecting with the players on that front, I'm connecting with like business owners or team owners or people are more in the professional side of esports.
Absolutely. Okay. So say there's somebody watching this, maybe they're like 15, 16 years old, and they're like, wow, what Landon does sounds so incredible. I want to do that. How do they follow in your footsteps?
Yeah, so it's changing a lot right now. So it is hard to say what the future is going to require. Up until this point, up until maybe like a year ago, it was pretty much no rules. Like, if you wanted to be in my field, You could come in, work in esports, tell people that you were a performance coach, mental performance consultant. You could use whatever title you want. You could say it. You'd get put on a team and you'd work. That was kind of like historically how it's done. But because esports is developing so rapidly, now there's an expectation of professionalism. So whether that's like a degree in sports science, a degree in psychology, whatever it might be, something in that realm, you have to show that you've had some kind of training in what you're trying to do. So my biggest piece of advice for people that want to come into my field that are maybe they're 15, 16 years old is try and find a psychology, a sports science, a sociology, some kind of like performance domain degree and go do that degree, because this is one of the fields that unfortunately or fortunately, depending on how you look at it, it's going to be a little bit regulated in the future, and you're not going to be able to do what I do if you don't have that training. It just won't be allowed.
Okay, wonderful. Thanks for sharing that. Now, on your end, if you could go back in time to when you started your first year of university, okay, you just have a magic machine, you jump in, and there's little Landon. You're like, little Landon, I need to tell you everything that's going to happen for the next several years, but here's the one thing you need to know. What advice do you give yourself?
Absolutely start volunteering your time to esports organizations. I think that's the number one thing in esports nowadays is you have to build up reputation and experience. So if I had been like first year of university when I was in taking psychology, if I would have been working with teams either online or locally or whatever it might be, by the time I got out of my degree and into my master's, I probably could have been working with like professional level teams already, making like charging out big rates or whatever it might be while I was doing my master's degree. Instead, I didn't do any of that, and I had to start from scratch as soon as I was done my master's, and then I had to go do the volunteer work. And so yeah, just I would have absolutely told myself to get in the experience now.
Okay. Now, what skills make you unique? What makes you good at this job so that others can emulate those aspects?
That's a good question. So I think, and I'm kind of going to be probably speaking to the choir here, but the thing that I think makes me uniquely good at this job is that I'm a gamer at heart. So I understand how gamers think, and I understand what's going through their head, and I understand the struggles that they're having because I've most likely gone through the exact same thing. And it's you've always got to keep in mind that what you know. So for me, for example, like I went through the training of psychology and my master's. So my base level of knowledge for some of these things is a little bit higher than what somebody who's just playing is. And you always have to keep in mind that you're not speaking to somebody that's gone through a master's. You're speaking to somebody that's playing the games, and you have to make sure that you're relaying information that's understandable, or is that they can perceive, or that it resonates with them. And so just, like always keeping that I'm a gamer at the heart, keeping that mentality makes me effective.
I want to, what is the strangest thing you have found about gamers? Like when I essentially came into the space the same way you did. I had this degree, I've written all these books, I've got these clients, made all this money, like, where's my clients at? And like, it was really strange because there was a mindset. But I want to, like, when you came in, what was this mindset of gamers that was weird for you, if at all?
The weirdest thing is that there's maybe a couple of things, but one of the weirdest things is that people brag. It's almost a competition to see who can be in the worst state going into a performance. And what I mean by that is, like, I've gone to so many competitions where they're almost bragging. It's almost like a status symbol. They're like, yeah, I only got 2 hours of sleep last night, but I'm still going to be fine. Like, they're bragging about the fact that they only got a couple of hours sleep. Like, you might feel okay, you might feel like you're still good, but you've hurt your performance. Whether you feel like you had a good performance day or not, it could have been better if you would have been had an 8 hour sleep. And it was really strange to me that some of these negative things are almost bragging points, like how little sleep you've had, how many monsters you've drank today, or how you just raged out, or whatever it might be. Like, there's a lot of negative things that have become bragging points, and that was fascinating to me.
Is that something you're trying to correct, or is that something you just kind of have to dive into?
No, I think you got to correct it. Like, the way I see it is that correcting it is going to cause a performance decline, right? Like, so when we look at, like, say it's a graph, going in to correct that is going to harm the performance at first, but we're going to be fixing the culture long term. So then that graph is going to like dip, But then as you start kind of fixing some of those issues, it's going to climb back up again. But there's that period of time when you're resolving something, or you're trying to fix like sleep schedules or caffeine intake or exercise patterns or whatever it might be. There's going to be that period of time where there's going to be a dip in performance. And that's the part that's hard, because if I say you were my client, I say, okay, you got to cut out the caffeine or whatever the routine that we plan out is. 2 weeks into it, you're telling me I'm playing worse than ever before. I'm just going to keep on drinking caffeine. Why would I cut this out? And it's hard to get you to that point where that graph starts coming back up in performance, because you didn't see any immediate change, and in fact you saw immediate hurt. And so that's the hardest thing to get over. But no, I think we do definitely need to start correcting some of those things. Otherwise, burnout, health issues, you're not going to crack into the pro scene. Like, a whole bunch of things are going to happen if we don't.
Absolutely. How about the performance enhancing substances? So caffeine is a performance enhancing substance to some extent, but to what extent is that widespread?
It's kind of misunderstood a little bit, I think. And this is just my perception of it, and from my knowledge of it. Caffeine in esports is only, and there isn't a whole lot of research on this, so it's not super substantiated yet. So like, this does have to be taken with a grain of salt, what I'm about to say, but caffeine is only going to be a performance enhancing substance if you're not chronically using it, right? So what I mean is, like, if you are constantly drinking 4 or 5 Red Bulls a day, you're at best only going to be maintaining performance. So if you don't have Red Bull that day, you're going to have a performance decline. And if you have Red Bull that day, you're going to stay at that like equilibrium. You're going to stay at your baseline performance. However, if you're not drinking that much caffeine and you're training normally, you're training on like water or maybe tea, which is less caffeine, and then game day comes, you have a little bit of caffeine, not too much. There's a sweet spot, but you have a little bit of caffeine, then maybe you'll see a performance increase. But if you're constantly drinking 4 or 5 Red Bulls a day, at best, you're just going to be maintaining performance.
Okay, beautiful. I want to talk about you a little bit more, if we can, a little more personally, because I'd like to humble you if possible. You see, I believe that we learn the most from failures in life.
Yeah.
Like, when you get knocked down on your butt, you have to pick yourself up, dust yourself off, figure out what happened, and then move forward. Or at least that should be the goal, right? So I'd like to ask you, what is something that you have failed at, and what did you learn from it?
I think that first 12 months of my career, because again, I've only been in it for like 2 years. So 12 months is a big chunk of time. And I am I was very embarrassed of this at first. I'm very open about it now. I was bad. Like, I was not I was not a good practitioner. I didn't know, like, I had the theory and I had the knowledge, but I didn't know how to relay it to players, right? Like, I approached it wrong. And that 12 months, I was so frustrated at myself that I couldn't move forward. I wasn't making the steps forward in my career. And I was wondering, like, what am I doing wrong? What am I doing wrong? And it's because my approach was like it might have not been 12 months. It might have been like 8 months. It was just, I wasn't approaching players in the way that was effective. And that's not their fault. Like, players are doing their thing. I have to learn how to be an effective practitioner. And to do that, I have to learn how to relay information. And that's probably my biggest failure, is I didn't know how to do that at the start.
Well, what was the switch? Like, what specifically did you have to change? Were you like too kind? Were you too passive? Like, what was the change?
Yeah. So one of the issues that I've had to change is that, so in like the business setting or the sports setting, there's a clear barrier between coaching staff and athletes. They aren't buddies. They aren't friends. Like, that's just not the way it works, because that's not effective. In esports, players don't always listen to you unless you're buddies with them. Like, they want that rapport. They want that connection. And I came in and I became too close friends with a lot of the people that I work with. Like, I became like memeing around with them or telling jokes or texting, whatever it might be. I was too close of a friend with them. I went too hard on that area. And so I've had to swing that pendulum back a little bit and kind of find a sweet spot between that, where I'm still like friends and have that rapport and have that kind of like camaraderie with my players, but I'm also not just like a stone cold business coach kind of thing. Like, I had to find a middle ground there, and that was difficult. Some people might be better at it than I am, but that was definitely a challenge for me. And the way that I kind of tell other performance coaches that ask me how I've worked on this is, every coach knows about VOD reviews, like why VOD reviews are important for teams, that you go back and you look at your gameplay, you see where your team broke down, where they did well. It really helps you assess like how well your team's doing. And I'm still doing it. I didn't do it. I'm doing that. as well, but my own coaching skills is when I go into a session, I'll oftentimes record it and I'll listen back to it and be like, okay, was the player actually engaged with me there? Were they just kind of nodding away? Were they just going through the motions? Did I have their attention? Was I actually being impactful or effective? And I do like a VOD review, but for myself. And I don't think that a lot of coaches do that, but it's hugely helpful because you'll listen back and you'll be like, wow, I sound dumb there. Like I didn't get that message across. And that's okay to sound dumb as long as you're like catching it and adapting it for the future.
That's actually a fantastic idea because you can actually multi-purpose that, take out the lessons that you give them, and now you can create your own content, your own books, your own training materials based on the stuff you're already doing live.
Yeah. So
right on. Okay, exactly. Landon, this has been fantastic. How do people find you? How do they reach you on social?
Yeah, so if you are a big Twitter user, Twitter's probably one of the quickest ways to get a hold of me, and that's just at Vertex Psych. So it's VERTEXPSYC. So Vertex Psych. My name, Landon Gorbenko, will pop up on there, but that's probably the quickest way to get to me. That's my DMs are always open. LinkedIn is also a really useful tool. Like I mentioned, I use that a lot. So Landon Gorbenko there. But those are probably the two best platforms to find me.
Fantastic. All right. As we wrap it up, is there any final thoughts you want to share or anything I didn't ask you think we still need to cover?
I got one point that I like to say as frequently as possible, and it's a message to parents actually. And it's that if you're a parent of a kid in esports, don't approach it as a fear. Don't worry about your kids, but rather get educated and involved. I know that for myself, one of the biggest contributing factors that my parents did for me was that they were at every single one of my soccer games and they were cheering me on and they were supporting me in my development in soccer, but we don't see that in esports. And I know from countless people that I've worked with that one of the things they say that they wish their parents would do is just support them. So for any parents that have kids that are deep in esports, learn about the games they're playing and then go watch their games and just cheer them on. Even if you don't understand the game, just cheer them on. It'll mean the world to them. Beautiful advice. All right, Landon Gorbenko, thank you so much for coming on with us today. It was a genuine pleasure. Awesome, and I appreciate it. I love being able to talk with people about all things esports. So I appreciate your time as well. Absolutely, and thank you again. And for everybody else, I'm going to remind you all, don't be just a gamer, be a gamerpreneur.